Welcome to you. Thank you for joining this week's Truth. I'm John Gordon, and what a week it has been. It started off on Sunday with a 4-hour tribute to Charlie Kirk. It was a very sad occasion, yet when I look back on it, I left that service, metaphorically left, I was watching it on television, but when the service was over, I was enthused with patriotism, optimism, and incredible gratitude for the people that we have leading this country. They were all there, and they were all rock stars. They all hit the exact right notes. It was pure class. We're going to talk about that today with Lucas Miles. He is the director of Turning Point Faith. He was a close friend and ally of Charlie Kirk. And he's going to talk to us about the service, about Christianity in this country, and about the shooter. So that's an interview you're not going to want to miss. We also have Tony Lyons coming on. He is the author of MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. And we're talking to him about autism and Tylenol and all the things that Bobby Kennedy is trying to do to help make America healthy again. And then John Tamney comes on at the end of the show. He's going to be talking about the deficit delusion and what he says, why everything left, right, and supply side tells you about the national debt is wrong. We had a rather spirited conversation. I'm not really much of a subscriber to what he is saying, but you know what? The only way to get to the truth is to learn all sides and then make your own judgment. You'll have an opportunity to do that in just a few minutes when he comes on the program. Well, today's version of the truth, it's not a version of the truth, it's today's episode. There's only one version of the truth, and that is the truth. Today's episode of the truth is brought to you by Perfect Circle Renewable Energy. They are a restaurant services company in Atlanta that cover North Georgia. They are the premier restaurant services company. They collect your waste vegetable oil, clean your grease trap, clean your vent hood, and sanitize the front of the house and the back of the house. They've been at it now for 15 years. They have a sterling reputation. And you can check them out just by going to www.pcrenergy.com. Give them a call if you're tired of bad service, slow service, automated attendance, unanswered phone calls, and messy service. Give PCR Energy a chance. Give them a try. The Charlie Kirk service was perhaps one of the most memorable and impressive events I've ever witnessed. It was a service that would normally be reserved for heads of state, but there were 70,000 people in the State Farm Arena in Arizona, and another 30,000 in the Overflow building across the street, and untold millions watching worldwide. We did not realize the impact of Charlie Kirk in his life, but we sure have since his passing. And I don't know what Tyler Robinson was thinking when he pulled that trigger, if it was him, and I believe that it was. The unintended consequences have been that Turning Point has taken on a greater significance than anybody ever wildly imagined was possible. They've grown from 1 million donors to 12 million. They've grown from 2,000 chapters to applications for 36,000 new chapters. And Erica Kirk assured the world that she was going to continue in the legacy and the name of Charlie Kirk to be the CEO of Turning Point and all of its affiliates, which are not inconsequential. I understand that they have a $80 million a year budget and 500 employees in the campus in Tucson where they are headquartered. Well, as I said, everyone who spoke at the service, I thought, just knocked it out of the park. They were absolutely poised. They were genuine. They were real. They just exuded class. I know that Charlie, looking down on his service, was very proud. Here we went to the trouble to edit out many of the better moments. Well, they were all wonderful moments of the service, perhaps some of the more memorable moments that you, if you didn't get to watch it, you might want to give a listen to. If you're listening to us, we're on the John Fredericks Radio Network in 8 cities on 22 AM and FM radio stations. But we are also coming to you right now live on Rumble Live, Getter Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and X Spaces. So if you'd like to come and watch the live stream, you can see the clips rather than just listen to them. And if you're on Getter.com on the John Fredericks page, you can interact with us right there, right now, where a couple thousand people have already joined us. We'll be up over 6,000 by the end of the show if history repeats. We'd love to have you come and listen. If you like podcasts, you can catch us, John Gordon Truth, on Spotify, iHeart's podcast, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. All right, let's give you some snippets from the people who spoke at Charlie Kirk's incredible service last Sunday.
You thought you could kill Charlie Kirk? You have made him immortal.
By trying to silence Charlie, his voice is now louder than ever.
Charlie waged war not with a weapon, but with a tent, a microphone, his mind, and the truth. And the gates of hell could not prevail against him.
But Charlie Kirk was bold. He actively sought out to engage peacefully, respectfully, those who he disagreed with.
After 10 years of work with Charlie Kirk, after his witnessing to my life, I have become a Christ-centered man.
It is better to die a young man in this world than to sell your soul for an easy life with no purpose, no risk, no love, and no truth.
My granddaughter left for college in Europe. Her mother noticed that she packed a Bible. When her mother asked her why she made that choice, she said, "I want to live more like Charlie." And it's...
The gun was pointed at him, but the bullet was aimed at all of us. The lesson of Charlie's life is that you should never underestimate what one person can do with a good heart, a righteous cause, a cheerful spirit, and the will to fight, fight, fight. Have to fight.
Why was he killed?
He was killed because his words made a difference, because he was showing people the light, and he was killed by the dark.
My husband, Charlie, he wanted to save young men just like the one who took his life. That young man. On the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That man, that young man, I forgive him.
Boy, if that doesn't bring a tear to your eye and a lump in your throat, I don't know what will. I watched that service and I watched that young lady. She was, I don't know how she did it. I really do not know how she did it. I don't think I'm capable of doing what she did. Not because there were 70,000 people in the live audience and millions of people around the world, but just because she was having to deal with all the grief and all the emotion that she was overwhelmed with. But she was so composed and so thoughtful and so classy in all of her comments. I just learned a great amount of admiration for her. And I just wonder what Tyler Robinson is thinking. Did he ever stop and think that what he was about to unleash would have been the exponential growth of Turning Point USA and their affiliate organizations, which evidently he wanted to destroy? Well, Erica Trump has said that she is going to carry on the legacy and she's going to be CEO of Trump or of Turning Point USA. And there was an obvious, real affection between her and President Trump. You could just tell that Erica, who I understand lost her dad many years ago, needed someone to lean on. And she did that metaphorically and literally in that service. And Trump was a steady rock for her to lean on, and a great comfort to her and the nation. I thought President Trump did a magnificent job in eulogizing Charlie. He was his customary real self. He told the truth, and he was very transparent in the things that he thought and felt. He got a little political, as we're going to talk to Lucas Miles in a few minutes. They knew that when they invited him. You know what you get when you get Trump, and that's okay. You know, that's to be expected. But the lineup of people that were there, you just heard from Stephen Miller, Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, Benny Johnson, who I've heard about but had not been exposed to. I was really impressed with that young guy, and I'm going to go learn more about him. Vice President Vance, Bobby Kennedy, and I think he summed it up for the world. We all want to live more like Charlie. What a great aspiration for all of us to hang our hat on. And I love that story that he told with the punchline that we want to live our life more like Charlie, speaking his granddaughter's words when her mother found her putting a Bible in her suitcase to go off to college. That was a really special moment, followed by Erica Trump and then Erica Kirk and then President Trump. So it was, it was just one of those tough events, one of those tough things that we all have to deal with in life. And I'm grieving, and you're grieving. None of us are grieving like Erica Kirk is grieving, and her two adorable young children will have to live the rest of their life without their father. Tyler Robinson, did you contemplate that? Did you even stop and think about the grief that you were inflicting on so many just because of your misguided demonic ideology that you somehow in your delusional state felt that you were achieving something? You achieved everything that you didn't want to, which was to magnify Turning Point and the impact that they will most assuredly have. For Erica Kirk to be able to stand in front of that crowd and say, quote the Bible, quote Jesus on the cross, and say, I forgive that young man, that was pretty darn noble, if you ask me. Well, he's back. Like the bad penny that won't go away. The ABC suits caved to, I guess, the woke followers of Jimmy Kimmel. And after having suspended him indefinitely, indefinite lasted for a week, they obviously caved, and they originally removed him because of a backlash from people that were outraged by Jimmy Kimmel's comments, somehow trying to attach Tyler Robinson to the MAGA movement. It was one of the most despicable lies that I've ever heard someone tell. And it was on national television. It caused the head of the FCC to say that he thought that it was time that they evaluate the network's compliance with the FCC rules of public service for their air that they lease from the United States government. And I wasn't too keen on that, frankly. There was so much backlash and so much pushback against Jimmy Kimmel. I don't think that the head of the FCC needed to weigh in, although I certainly would have echoed his thoughts, but leave it to people like me and the other alternative news outlets to carry that message. You just don't want government interference into free speech, regardless of how bad it was. Now, the FCC has a legitimate role to be involved, but I think it is a forum of last resort, and I just think that it was a little early in the conversation and did not really reflect what I would like my government to do, because if the shoe was on the other foot, imagine our outrage. And so I just do not deprive Jimmy Kimmel his right to speak. I just resent the fact that he did it over the public airwaves, where he has an obligation to serve the public interest. Well, there's no public interest in lying to the audience that you serve, and there's no public interest into further dividing an already divided country. Now, Jimmy Kimmel made his return on Tuesday night of this week, a full week after his indefinite suspension. Those guys are have such resolve and principled individuals. They suspended him indefinitely for a whole week. Give me a break. But that's how it should happen. It should happen because of reactions in the marketplace. And I think it was the marketplace that spoke, that drove ABC originally to cancel Kimmel. And then it was the marketplace that brought him back. Well, welcome to the free enterprise system, ladies and gentlemen. So you can either be part of the problem or you can be part of the solution. And the easy solution is very simply turn off ABC. Everybody in this reach of my voice, if you want to be part of the solution, turn off ABC. And I say that to my lovely, wonderful wife who thinks David Muir is really a good anchor. We're turning off ABC. It may create a little domestic discord. It's a price I'm willing to pay. We'll find another good-looking guy for Helen to watch read the news, okay? But ABC is forbidden in this household. Except, is Wheel of Fortune an ABC product, or is it just come on after the ABC News? I don't know. I might make an exception for Wheel of Fortune because I kind of like it myself. Well, let me know what you think. If you have an opinion about what I've just said and talked about, please write me, johngordontruth@gmail.com. I love to get your email. I'll read it. I'll respond. I don't always respond the way you want me to, but I will respond and respond with the unvarnished truth as I know and believe it to be. All right, so here was Jimmy Kimmel's triumphant return to late night TV.
Thank you. Anyway, as I was saying before I was interrupted, if you're just joining us, we are preempting your regularly scheduled encore episode of Celebrity Family Feud to bring you this special report. I'm happy to be here tonight with you. I'm not sure who had a weirder 48 hours, me or the CEO of Tylenol. It's been overwhelming. I've heard from a lot of people over the last 6 days. I've heard from all the people in the world over the last 6 days. Everyone I have ever met has reached out 10 or 11 times. I also want to thank all of you. Who supported our show, cared enough to do something about it, to make your voices heard so that mine can be heard. I will never forget it. And maybe most of all, I want to thank the people who don't support my show and what I believe, but support my right to share those beliefs anyway.
I do believe that he has the right to share his beliefs, just not on national television with a license that requires that you serve the public interest, and lying does not serve any interest. And I find that deplorable and hard to watch. Now, imagine the irony. It just dawned on me, frankly, of me telling you to turn off ABC. And what's the next thing I do? I play a clip from ABC. I'm embarrassed. I feel small, Anthony. What are we going to do? We could go out and back and edit it out or change the monologue. Maybe just delete the clip. No, we're not going to do that because, frankly, folks, for the first time ever, I thought that Jimmy Kimmel, up until the very end, was actually funny. I actually laughed at the things that he said. That's what that is the roadmap for him to be able to remain on television. But this nonsense of going on national TV every night, night in and night out, and criticizing the President of the United States, not in a funny way, but in a mean way, is divisive and is wrong. And would I feel differently if he had been doing it to Biden? I don't know. It would have been deserved. It would have been truthful, but I don't know. I think it cuts both ways. So let comedians be comedians and leave the politics to others, I think, is my admonition, especially when it's just so one-sided. I mean, I looked at stats the other day of Jimmy Kimmel and his jokes about Trump and Biden, and the difference was just overwhelming. It was something like 1,100 jokes about Trump, and of course they were all negative, to maybe 60 or 70 jokes about Biden, and they may have been about the way he ate ice cream or something. I don't know. But, he and Colbert, they're just flat out nasty and ugly, and there's no place for it in that context, in that form. That's the way that I feel about it. How do you feel? Let me know. JohnGordonTruth@gmail.com. All right. Trump went to the UN this week, and oh my gosh, did he excoriate the UN. The more I watch this man, I've been attuned to him for decades. Just the more I get to know him, the more I see him, the more I admire him. He was so courageous to go into a room filled with diplomats from around the world and scold most of them. And he did not do it with a sharp tongue. He just laid out the case very factually. Now, when he arrived at the UN and was on the escalator on the way up to, what do you call where the diplomats meet? What's the room called? I've been there. I actually stood at the same podium that Trump was at, not as a speaker, but as a tourist. They would let you go up and stand at the podium. It's really pretty cool to be able to go in to that room and see it. In the General Assembly building, I guess it's a General Assembly room, it's a very impressive place, and one that is iconic because we've seen it on television and in news magazines all our entire lives. But so Trump went in and he took one step on the escalator, Melania leading the way, and about 2 seconds after getting on it, the escalator stopped. Now, what's that about? I think it was about just being disrespectful to Trump. And then halfway through his speech, the teleprompter stopped. Now, I don't know whether the teleprompter was operated by somebody at the UN or whether it was one of Trump's own team. I would really suspect the latter. That is a duty that I would not delegate to anybody other than my own team, because it does open the door for devilment. And devilment did occur, or maybe the freaking teleprompter just had a hiccup and broke. I kind of lean toward the latter. But Trump was mad at somebody. Here are some of the more poignant moments of his talk earlier this week.
The teleprompter is not working. I can only say that whoever's operating this teleprompter is in big trouble. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen. but she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. See, I can tell you. I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell. The UN official stated in 1989 that within a decade, entire nations could be wiped off the map by global warming. Not happening. It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world. And I'm really good at predicting things, you know? They actually said during the campaign, they had a hat, the best-selling hat. Trump was right about everything. And I don't say that in a braggadocious way, but it's true. I've been right about everything.
I agree. And that's one of the things that I admire about him so much. And he makes these outlandish statements that you think are just ridiculous, and then damned if they don't turn out to be true 6 months or a year later. And so I have such respect and trust in Trump that I just pretty much accept many, if not most, of the things that he tells us and try to do my best to support him. I'm not sucking up, okay? If you think that I'm somehow trying to incur Donald Trump's good favor, you're mistaken. That is nowhere in my psyche, because I also call him out like I called him out at about Charlie Kirk's funeral. I didn't feel it was appropriate or in good taste to go political in that venue. But when you put Trump in front of a microphone and he's able to speak to tens of millions of people around the world, what did you expect him to do? Of course he's going to go political. That's a choice that he made. And that's okay. I'm okay with it, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. Okay? There's a small, slight difference there. And so I just illustrate that to say I don't give him a free buy on everything or free pass. I let you know when I think that he's crossed the line. And it probably falls into the compartment of who cares what John Gordon thinks. But you, my listener, you think you must like it because you do keep tuning in. And I'm so grateful to you for that. I truly am. And I try and take the responsibility seriously so that we do get it right and we are telling you the truth. Just like Trump did at the UN, he did not hold back. He said that the UN failed to contribute to a single peace deal that he struck. And he identified 7 of them, most of which I did not even know were conflicts. Did you know all these were conflicts, Anthony? I mean, I heard it here. Some of this, I heard it here first. Cambodia and Thailand have been at war. Kosovo and Serbia, I knew about that one. Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Pakistan and India. Israel and Iran. Yeah, I certainly knew about that one. I'm not sure that that skirmish is over. Egypt and Ethiopia and Armenia and Azerbaijan. How did I do on that one? Oh, shut up. Azerbaijan? Okay, thank you, Anthony. Just joking with you. So he ended 7 wars. And he said he did not even receive a phone call from anyone at the UN offering to help finalize the deals. They were just didn't show up for the party. But that's their job. So where were they? And Trump called them out on it. Good for him. Trump went on to say the UN was failing to live up to its potential as a world peacemaker. Now, I do want to give attribution to the Epoch Times, which had this wonderful article called The 7 Takeaways from Trump's UN Speech. And so I am reading from that article, and I want to give proper attribution to Epoch Times. If you didn't see it, it is a wonderful article, and it came out on Wednesday of this week, earlier in this week. And I don't know about you, but I love the Epoch Times. I think they do just a great job. And they're fearless, and they do tell the truth. I really dig them. I think one of the way that the escalator struck me was somebody was playing games. Somebody was making it hard for Trump, and they just wanted to throw him off his mark a bit, and it was another way of showing disrespect to him. Well, good for you. I like that shooter in Utah. I wonder how well you really thought that one through, buddy, or ma'am, whoever did it. 22% of the UN budget comes from the United States. They enjoy free rent afforded them by the United States. 26% of their peacekeeping budget is funded by the United States. So I would just be careful if I were you, because Trump doesn't like the UN. He made that very clear. He didn't feel that they were effective. He felt they were incompetent and that they were shirking their responsibilities. And I think the subtext was, why do we bother with having a United Nations? Well, now, I can argue the other side of that coin. We need a place where world leaders can come and talk, and maybe it will avoid conflicts, but it should be also equally involved in resolving conflicts, just like President Trump told them when he visited the UN last Tuesday. All right, illegal immigration. Failing to curtail illegal immigration endangers countries' social and economic security. The president said both the immigration and their suicidal energy ideas will be the death of Western Europe if something is not done immediately. He went on to say that what makes this world so beautiful is that each country is unique. In other words, they have their own culture. Take France, for instance. When you visit France, they want you to speak a little French. Bonjour, bonsoir, comment allez-vous? Ah, parlez-vous français? Un peu. That's it. Okay. English? Parlez-vous English? But just acknowledging their culture, I think, is what the French, and I think what most people of their home country would say. But to stay this way, each sovereign nation must have the right to control its own borders. And then he talked about the migrations that we have seen. And, they're mainly affecting the Western world. They're not migrations into China or India or Russia. They're in the Western world that these migrations are occurring. And I talked to Lucas Miles about that. I said, don't you get the sense that a lot of the turmoil that we see in this country is not the result of organic protest, but rather intentional interference from some other entity or foreign land? And we'll talk about that some more in another episode, but I think China is very much determined to destroy America so they can swoop in and mop up the spoils. And I think Russia would fall into that same category. But we're pushing back hard. But I think a lot of the strife that we see is coming from China. I wonder about Tyler Robinson and whether he did in fact act alone, or whether he was part of some cult or group, or maybe he was a proxy for a foreign nation. I don't know, but I'm not willing to buy that he just showed up there on that rooftop alone and that it was a product of his own depraved brain. I just don't buy that. All right, so then Trump talked about the climate policies. Trump said Europe had collectively reduced its carbon footprint by 37%, but Europe's efforts were negated by a 54% increase in global carbon emissions driven by China. So he said, quote, "Congratulations, Europe, great job. Cost yourself a lot of jobs, a lot of factories, but you reduced the carbon footprint by 37%. However, for all of that sacrifice and much more, it's been totally wiped out and then some by China's emissions." Hard to argue with that statistic. There is renewed optimism on the Ukraine-Russian conflict. President Trump met with Zelensky to discuss the war in the Ukraine while They were both at the United Nations meeting. Now, just think about how the world turns and how life plays out. It just wasn't that long ago that we witnessed a dressing down of Zelensky by Trump and the vice president in the Oval Office. Probably, 6 months ago, 7 months ago? The whole world watched on as Trump just really dressed down Zelensky. I think Trump thought that Zelensky was the problem. But now he has come to realize that Zelensky is really not the problem. It's Vladimir Putin. Just like I told you on this show repeatedly, that Putin is a liar, a thief, and a murderer. You heard it here first, folks. No, you didn't hear it here first. You already know it. But we all are in agreement that Putin is the problem, and I think it's taken a while for Trump. I think he naively thought that he could twist Putin's arm like he twisted Zelensky's arm to make peace, to stop the killing, to end the suffering. And he thought, because Putin told him he would, that Putin was ready to make nice and end the war. Wrong. He did just the opposite. He bombed the hell out of the Ukraine the very night that he told Trump that. So he's just a liar. And he wants to steal the Ukraine's territory, just like he stole Robert Kraft's Super Bowl ring. I mean, who does that? He took the ring away from Bob Kraft, put it on his finger, looked at it admiringly, then takes it off his finger and puts it in his pocket, turns around and walks off. Why? Because he could. He's a thief. He is a crook. Who would ever do that? Would you do that? No, you wouldn't do that, and neither would I. Trump signaled new support for Ukraine and indicated support for the Ukraine to help the Ukraine take back all the land it's lost to Russia since 2014. Are you listening, Mr. Putin? That should come as a bit of a surprise to you. Trump is saying that he's taking back all the territory, not just the territory that they took in the current war that is now in its third year, I believe. So Trump is actually enlarging the scope of what he thinks that the Ukraine should be resolute in taking back. Good for him. Good for Zelensky. Trump said that the U.S. and the European Union will join forces and fight to win back all of the Ukraine and put it back in its original form. And he wrote that on Truth Social earlier this week as well. So Trump summarized it, wrapped it up by saying that this war is distinguishing Russia. In fact, it is distinguishing Russia and Putin as a paper tiger. That for all the loss of life and all the expenditure of money and all the arms that they've wasted, that what do they have to show for it? 3.5 years later, they haven't won the war. Trump says that it reflects and reveals Russia's weakness. Now, you know Vladimir Putin is fuming listening to those words. Trump also said that, in response to a question, that he felt that NATO should shoot down Russian aircraft that enter NATO and their member nations' airspace. That's pretty provocative, but why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't they? You think Russia would tolerate Poland sending a fighter jet into Russians' sovereign territory? They wouldn't think twice, they'd shoot it down. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, if you ask me. President Trump also pressed the members of the UN to stop buying oil from Russia. Now, the United States and its allies are not supposed to be buying oil from Russia, but we find from what President Trump told us at the UN that certain members, our allies, are still buying oil from Russia. Well, what does that mean? It means that they get money to fund the war with Ukraine. How stupid is that? And they're threatening their own national security in the process. So Trump just laid it out and put it right in their face and made them have to face the reality of what they were doing. Then finally, he talked about ending biological and nuclear weaponry. He said there's enough nuclear arms to blow up the whole world, and if they're ever used, it would likely be the end of humanity. I think that's what Elon Musk is thinking as well, which is why he wants to colonize Mars. And he has asked for all nations to stop their arms buildup. So it was a pretty direct and intense conversation that Trump had. It was one that needed to be had. And I'm just so proud of President Trump for going into the Lyons den and having the courage and the conviction to put it right in their faces, not in a mean way, not with a biting tone, but just with direct evidence and facts. And I don't know how anyone could have listened to that and not have gotten the message. Well, before we move on to our interviews, I just want to also mention that at Charlie Kirk's funeral, there was a moment where Elon Musk came up and visited the president in the box that President Trump was sitting in, and they exchanged pleasantries, and there seemed to be a lot of warmth and good-naturedness. I think the nation was glad to see that. I know I certainly was. And I think Elon has so much to offer this country and the Republican Party. I'm glad to see that they have thawed the ice a little bit, and maybe they can even figure out a way to get back to working together. Sometimes you can just get too close to the sun. I think that's what happened to Elon. I think he just got too close to Trump and probably exercised and expressed his opinion more than was requested or wanted, and that I know it aggravated members of the cabinet. There was sibling rivalry, if you will, that was evident between members of the cabinet and Elon. If you watched him when he went to cabinet meetings and the president would ask him to speak, Elon got a very icy reception. And I said I thought that bringing X into the meetings and parading him around was not appropriate. And it was, I don't know, just wasn't a thing to do. It wasn't bring your kid to work day that day. And so Elon overstepped, and I'm sorry about that. I can imagine his enjoyment and enthusiasm for being in Trump's presence and having that special time, but it ended. Now Musk has gone back to work at Tesla, and oh my gosh, is that company on fire. I told y'all, I've been telling you, but just in the last month, the stock is up just a very large percentage. It's up about 33% from an average of around 330 a month ago to now $450, knocking on $450 a share. Many of the analysts have changed their forecast and have moved Tesla from a hold position to buy, those who were at hold. The people that were in the buy column have upped their price targets. Piper Sandler has the highest price target at $550 a share. So I don't dispense financial advice. The only advice that I will dispense is do yourself a favor, go thoroughly research this company, determine your own risk appetite, and give the company a look. If you've got some personal savings that you want to deploy, Tesla's something that you might want to look at, just like I think NVIDIA is something to look at. NVIDIA has sort of stagnated. They've seemed to have plateaued of late since late July, when they had a pretty good run through today. They've pretty much settled into a trading range of between 168, 170 to 180. And it's just sort of bouncing between those ranges. NVIDIA is poised to take advantage of AI and the expansion of data centers. And they're forming partnerships like with Intel. And they're also, Tesla's probably one of their largest customers. So I think NVIDIA's got some runway left ahead of it. Perhaps you want to look at it too, but not advice, just encouragement to go look and then just ask yourself whether you want to make a decision to do that. We come to you every Saturday on the John Fredericks Radio Network in Nashville, Atlanta, Richmond, Norfolk, Lynchburg, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Morgantown, West Virginia. We're also live right now on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Twitter, X, and Getter. If you're on Getter, if you're not on Getter, come on over there and interact with us right now. We have several thousand people doing so like they do every Saturday. And I just want you to know I am so grateful to each of you for tuning in on our show. And I love to hear from you. Write me at john@gordontruth@gmail.com. And we also come to you on cdm.press. They're also on all of those social media outlets. They take our feed and redistribute it on their platforms, including their 13 digital platforms across the U.S., like Miami and Colorado and Atlanta and up there in Northern Virginia. They have a wonderful franchise, and we're honored that they carry our broadcast every Saturday and Sunday, noon to 2. And thank you for tuning in. Today we're brought to you by PCRenergy.com. We appreciate their sponsorship. And now let's get right to our first interview. And we're going to start with Tony Lyons. He's the president of MAHA Action. And this was a really fascinating interview for me. We talk about America's kind of epidemic of obesity and diabetes, and how Bobby Kennedy wants to change that. We talk about the reinstitution of the president's physical fitness program. We talk about Tylenol and autism. Let's get right to it. Now let's go to Tony Lyons. Tony Lyons joins us now on The Truth. He's the president of MAHA Action. That's Robert F. Kennedy's political action committee designed to make America healthy again. Tony, it's an honor to have you on The Truth today. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here with you.
So Robert F. Kennedy evidently has made a lot of people mad. It seems like the swamp is after him. Why would the swamp be after Robert Kennedy?
Well, we've got a lot of different companies and a lot of different areas of production of products that have become delivery mechanisms for toxins in this country, whether it's big food, big ag, big pharma, the big pesticide companies. So all of these companies have been basically bribing our public officials to allow them to sell things to the public. In many cases, you can't sell these products in any other country.
I'm sorry, did you say bribing our officials?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a little bit of a stretch in the sense that they're, donating money, they're hiring lobbyists, they're putting pressure on people in, all kinds of ways. But essentially, it's bribing. I mean, that's a harsh way of saying it, but that's what it amounts to. That, that the policies then and the green lighting of chemicals in products is not logical. It's not common sense. It's only done because these companies have the money to donate to, members of Congress, to pay for lobbyists, and to, pay for media, and then prevent people from doing investigative journalism. So every side of it is sort of covered, and it all becomes this sort of structure that allows them to operate in ways that you can't in any other of the 30 industrialized countries. So it becomes this sort of cesspool of corruption. And you see that mostly at the CDC, but also at all of the other branches of government, and primarily the health departments are the ones that I'm focused on. And they just have failed the American people, and they've done it by protecting these big companies who give them money.
Well, I had a conversation with my friend who is a pastor one day, and I just sort of philosophically said, it seems to me that money truly has become the root of all evil in our country. And he corrected me and he said, no, John, that's not true. He said, it is the love of money that is the root of all evil, as it is accurately reported in the Bible. And it appears to me that it's exactly what you just said. I mean, and this is not a subject that I'm very knowledgeable on, other than as just a consumer of the news. Really, I've not delved into it deeply. But my perception is, as you articulated, it is about money that they're paying to politicians through political donations. And God only knows how much of that money ends up in the pockets of those politicians. The lobbying institution in this country is a monster that does not seem to be capable of taming. And I've heard Secretary Kennedy say that while we've spent all of this money and devoted all of these efforts, that we've gone from one of the healthiest nations on earth from the early 60s to one of the least healthiest nations on earth. And it does seem to be directed by money and power, not what's good for the patient any longer. What happened to the Hippocratic Oath?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we are spending 3 times the amount of money that any of the other 30 industrialized countries spend on healthcare, and we have the worst health outcomes in every area. So, mortality of infants, of young children, longevity, obesity, autism, allergies of all kinds. I mean, just everything you look at, we're doing worse than children, than adults all around the world. And it's an outrage, and it's something that should be an embarrassment to the whole country, that if we can't protect if we can't protect our own children, then what can we be proud of? I mean, that should be the real baseline of what a successful country does. With all the money and power we have in the world, we have to be able to find ways to protect our children.
Well, I can tell you that when I went to middle school and high school, we had the President's Physical Fitness Test. Right. And out of probably 45 guys in my class, I probably finished 44th on the President's Physical Fitness Test. And it was a source of embarrassment to me. But it wasn't because I didn't want to be physically fit. My genetics, I just wasn't born that way. But they had the test, and we had PE every day, which I really loved. And Richard Reed was the head of the physical education department in my school. And to this day, I am grateful to him because he never made me feel inadequate. He never made me feel inferior. And instead, he did just the opposite. He would have me lead the physical education calisthenics that we started with every day that lasted about 20 minutes. And we would do sit-ups, we would do push-ups, and we would do the rocking chair. And he would have me lead the class. I was the least likely to lead the class. And it really is really causing me to get a lump in my throat because Coach Reed's not with us any longer. But, he was smart enough to tap into me in a way that developed, and I'm not trying to make it about me. I'm just saying that's my experience. It helped me develop lifelong skills that are with me to this day. And I would bet if I had to take that President's Physical Fitness Test today against my peers, I would probably beat the hell out of all of them.
Right.
But what I did was I wanted to make sure that my 3 boys did not go to that class and become embarrassed. So every Saturday and Sunday in particular, we would have drills in the backyard. We'd do pull-ups, we'd do sit-ups, and we would go jog a mile. And all three of them got the presidential award for being at the top of the class. I was so proud of them. And today they take care of themselves. What is the matter with that? I mean, what's there to argue with? My God, what's the matter with people?
Yeah. And then it becomes sort of a left-right thing. And, Secretary Kennedy says time after time, that we really have to learn to love our children more than we hate each other. And, we're coming out of this period where there's been such incredible corruption of the health agencies and of the government generally over a couple of decades. And I think what you're seeing from President Trump, from Secretary Kennedy, is just sweeping reforms in all different areas, just bold, decisive action to improve food labeling, to address vaccine injuries, pharma ads, the health of food generally, the distribution of drugs, the question of pesticides is really being looked at carefully. So there's just been progress on a massive scale, just something like 130 different decisive actions that have taken place. And it's just such beautiful progress towards combating chronic disease in this country. And mostly it's just not even covered by the mainstream media. And there are these massive kind of smear campaigns where people go on to multiple shows on the same day and they attack Secretary Kennedy or people who work for him. And they're really kind of comprehensive programs. So when people hear those kinds of statements, they should recognize that Secretary Kennedy is going up against some of the most powerful people on earth, some of the most powerful, greedy, corrupt people on earth who don't care that their products, whatever they are, that their products harm people and that they're making money at the expense of people's welfare, of their health, of their happiness. And so Bobby Kennedy then, so they say that he's this threat to science. And the truth is that he's a threat to this stream of corporate profits that has really harmed people. And he's no threat to the general public. He's this incredible, this passionate man who has dedicated his life to making people healthy. And, we need to have that done. We have the sickest children on earth. We need people to really focus on making children healthy, making all of us healthy once again. And I think it's happening now, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. But when you see all the negativity, you should really recognize where that comes from. It's people clinging to their profits. And it's not even, this is not in any way an anti-capitalist question. It's an anti-corruption question, because real capitalism, much more than government regulation, will solve these kinds of problems, because then people who do great things, who come up with great new products, who improve public health, who do things that actually make people's lives better, they're going to succeed in the marketplace of ideas, versus the current system, which is a system that protects companies that have bad products, that produce things that harm people, and then also in many cases gives them liability waivers so that they don't even have to face the consequences of the things that they're doing to the public.
Well, I was so proud of President Trump when he nominated Secretary Kennedy to that spot. I mean, it was a controversial nomination, and the swamp rats really came out in force to oppose it. I felt like it was a bold move, and I thought it was the absolute correct move, because we need to pull the layers of the onion back and really look into the healthcare of this country. And I think Secretary Kennedy may be the foremost person to have awakened us to these facts. So I really commend President Trump for having done that, the Senate for confirming him, and especially Secretary Kennedy for being willing to take all the arrows that he has very unfairly had to endure. So I've saw Dave Ricks, the president of Eli Lilly, last week in Los Angeles at the All-in-One Summit, which I attended.
Mm-hmm.
And he seemed to be one of the most level-headed, reasonable, and believable people I've ever encountered. Do you think the heads of these pharmaceutical companies do you think they are aware of the extent of the corruption that their own companies are involved in to some extent? And is it just too big for them to wrestle? I mean, how does it happen? And who are the puppet masters? Who are allowing and fostering this?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. And I've heard some of those kinds of stories that people have met senior people at big food companies, big ag companies, big pharma companies, and they say, these are in many cases very pleasant people who seem like they care, and that they're not, that they don't seem like these arch villains,
right,
that we would guess that they are. And so the question is, how does that kind of a system work, where and maybe it's partially that the system is just set up so that these companies, what the companies are trying to do generally is just make as much money as they can, and you kind of have to have a system that incentivizes people to do good things. And what we have now is a system that incentivizes people at the heads of these companies to do the wrong thing. That's how they make the most money. That's how they're the most successful.
And for lack of a better word, just to engage in sheer greed. I mean,
Right.
that's frankly what it feels like to me. And I don't know how you regulate that. I mean, when I was a kid, a long, long time ago, I really had the perception that there was a lot of self-discipline at all levels of our country, and whether it was in government or in business, even in parenting, that people really did strive to do the right thing. It seems like that has just gone out the window now, and it's just, as we've talked about, just all about the almighty dollar.
Yeah, but if you have a system where, so there are a bunch of companies now going out trying to get liability waivers for pesticides. So they're saying, look, pesticides are dangerous. You're all right. They sometimes cause breast cancer or other kinds of cancers, but we really need them to have food for our population. And so what they're saying is, well, what we need then is a liability waiver, because if we can be sued for these products that we're creating that are necessary for the public, we're going to have to stop producing them. And the same thing is true, for example, with vaccines, that in 1986, the heads of the major pharmaceutical companies went to Washington, brought their lobbyists with them, gave big donations to members of the House and Senate. And they were able to get this bill through Congress that gave them a total liability waiver, not just for the vaccines for the 7 viruses that you vaccinated for in 1986, but for any vaccines that were ever created in the future. And that was signed into law by President Reagan. And so what that then leads to is an incentive program to kind of produce more and more vaccines. So you went from vaccinating for 7 viruses to a time where now children, by the time they're 18, they get 73 up to around 80 vaccines, different in each state. So what you need, so if you look at the companies and you say, well, the guy running this company doesn't look like a bad guy. Well, he's been kind of green lighted to just produce profits based on these products that the government says are safe and effective, and they just kind of pump them out. And so you kind of need to have a system set up where people don't have liability waivers, where they don't have the ability to poison the American public and then not have any consequences, not pay for the damage that they create. Because what we want is for the incredible scientists in this country, incredible doctors, the smaller researchers, the smaller companies who come up with good ideas, with new ideas that actually help people. We want to have a system in place that helps them deliver their products to the public, so that the public then has the information of what's safe, what isn't safe. They have real data. There's this radical transparency. And then people begin to make better decisions. And then the companies that are doing bad things and that are hurting people don't do as well in the marketplace. That, I think, is a better system than regulation, because the problem is that the regulators can, like I said when we started, in some sense, they can be bribed, and they are bribed. And their lobbyists come in and they exert so much pressure. And that's not a good system for public health. It has to be that you're creating a product that is, that is a reasonable price, that has good health outcomes, that doesn't have toxins in it, doesn't have toxic chemicals in it. Those are the companies that ought to succeed. And we have a system now that keeps those innovative companies down and promotes these gigantic companies that are doing horrible things.
Well, I think the worst thing that you can do for any living person or any institution is to give them unlimited money with no accountability.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what I think you just described: a full immunity from prosecution or from a civil lawsuit. How about just a limited waiver? If you are acting in good faith, in good conscience, and not knowingly, willfully pushing a drug with known detrimental side effects.
Right.
And isn't that exactly what happened in COVID, that Anthony Fauci pushed these vaccines and he knowingly and willfully knew that there were inherent risk and dangers with them, and he lied to us by telling us that social distancing and masking would keep us safe, when it was just a complete lie, as we later found out when we read his emails. So where is the accountability for Dr. Fauci? I know Rand Paul is on his case, but is anybody else, and is there a will to hold him accountable for the lies that he told the American people?
He certainly should be. And when you look at President Trump, during the start of COVID and during Warp Speed, I mean, I've thought a lot about what happened there. And I think that what President Trump was able to accomplish was remarkable, even though it wasn't good. And I think the reason that it wasn't good is that even the president of the United States was lied to. And he was lied to by a whole group of people who were trying to convince him that this vaccine was going to totally end COVID, that it was safe and effective, and that once people got it, COVID would just end. And so that just wasn't true. And he's come out just in the last couple of weeks, and he said that they came to him and they told him that, and they presented him with information that they then didn't present to the public, so that there couldn't really be scientific scrutiny of it. And what he has demanded is that they deliver that information, their case studies, their peer-reviewed studies, all of the science they have, so that we can look at it now once and for all. Because what these companies did was they tried to get it to be hidden from the public. Radical transparency, where the public can have access to the information that will make it possible for them to make better decisions for themselves and for their families. And, President Trump yesterday was just so incredible when he basically said, I want to be known and remembered as the president who really cared about public health, who really rolled back chronic disease, who took autism that was 40 years ago, it was 1 in 10,000. Now it's 1 in 31. And he said, I want to roll that back to 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 20,000. And I think that was really just a fascinating moment. And it was just sort of a sign that we have a president now maybe we should call him the MAHA president, but a president who's really willing to dedicate his time and his energy and his resources and to bring in Secretary Kennedy and his whole team to really address the chronic disease epidemic and to try to make Americans healthy once again, and to recognize how important it is that you can't have situation has done probably in the history of the country. That things have been going downhill for a long time, and they're just kind of turning it back.
Well, I agree with everything that you just said. I want to, before we move on to autism and Tylenol, I have made the same point that you just made 100 times, and I get a lot of pushback from people. They're mainly, anti-Trumpers, the Trump deranged people, but they're not willing to give him a break at all. I mean, and they assume that he is supposed to have the inherent knowledge of an MD, which he has never professed to do. I think it was perfectly reasonable that he would listen to Anthony Fauci, who was the director of the National Health Institute and had been involved in health in the United States and the government for 30 years. He was the highest paid member of government. And then he had that little Dr. Birx running around on his coattails. And the only thing that I felt then and I feel now was that when they got rid of Robert Redfield, that was a huge red flag that someone should have stood up and taken notice of, because he was telling us that the narrative on COVID was not correct, and why he is continuing to suffer in wherever we send our people, where the Russians, Siberia. I mean, I think Dr. Redfield is in effectively Siberia, and he needs to be rehabilitated. Maybe Robert Kennedy could bring him back in some official capacity, because I think he was a truth broker, and he paid a big price for it. And I really resent that. But now, so autism, I've heard about autism obviously more in the last 10 years than I have in my entire life, because as you point out, it's gone from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 31 people, children.
Yeah.
That is a sobering, staggering statistic that people should really stop and reflect on for a moment. But what is exactly autism? I have kind of a vague notion of it, but then you see people with like Elon Musk that they say, oh, he's on the spectrum. Well, okay, I don't even really know what that means. He's on the spectrum, the autism spectrum.
Yeah, there was one thing that I just wanted to show you first, and that is Robert Redfield's new book. It's called Redfield's Warning.
I am so glad you shared that. I have not heard of that, but I will definitely get a copy of it and read it.
Yeah, it's not coming out for about a month. It's called Redfield's Warning.
Are you in touch with Dr. Redfield by chance?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that his name's right on the tip of my tongue. He wrote No Trade is Free. He was in the Commerce Department under Wilbur Ross. I've had dinner with him. I know him personally. I'm just drawing a blank. Anyway, when he wrote his book, The Truth was his first appearance, and that book became a New York Times bestseller. So tell Dr. Redfield that you've got a place for him to make his debut. It's a good petri dish for an interview. He can come here and experiment. Bob Lighthouser, who pops in my brain. Anyway,
so let me say a few things about what President Trump did yesterday, and then I've actually got to go. So,
give us a 1-minute primer on autism, if you would.
Okay, so autism and the idea that vaccines don't cause it is a purposely complicated issue. So they say, well, vaccines don't cause autism, right? So the problem is that you can't even define a vaccine now, because after the 1986 law that gave a total liability waiver to any manufacturer of a vaccine in the United States, this law was so comprehensive. These were highly profitable companies And they actually were able to go to Washington, D.C. and just make themselves much more profitable. But then you saw this incredible upswing in the number of vaccines, right?
Yes.
So they didn't want to change one word of that act of Congress because it was so generous to them. And it was such an incentive to make more and more vaccines because you could never have responsibility for any vaccine, for any side effect, for anything. So what they then did was they kept changing the definition of a vaccine. So in the US, we have the broadest possible definition so that it's almost like anything that have to be a needle, it can be a patch, it can be a nasal spray. So they want it to be as broad as possible because
which expands their liability waiver.
Because then the liability waiver
gets
more and more broad, right?
Jiminy Christmas.
And then you look at autism, that they say that vaccineism diagnosis. And there's a court that was created by that 1986 act, and it's called the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program Court. And through that court, billions of dollars have been paid out to the parents of vaccine injured children. And none of those payments have gone to children whose parents claim that they developed autism because they don't compensate for autism. What they do compensate for is many of the symptoms that go into this really vague autism diagnosis. So billions of dollars have been paid for injured children who have all of these symptoms that are actually autism or a part of autism, whether it's neurological damage, brain damage, tics, dyspraxia, OCD. So many of those kinds of things, if you get those from a vaccine and you can prove it, you can get compensation from the government, not from the companies who created the products, but from those from that court. So there's no question that there's a correlation between vaccines and autism. And so yesterday, President Trump and Secretary Kennedy and his whole team highlighted a connection between Tylenol and pregnancy and the newborn child. So what sometimes happens is something like this. So a child goes into a doctor, gets, say, 5 or 6 vaccines. Maybe one of them is the MMR. That then causes a febrile seizure, which is not that uncommon. And but a febrile seizure can, in certain circumstances, cause brain damage or lead to a seizure disorder that can lead to brain damage. But one of the things that parents then do is they see the child has a fever and they give the child Tylenol. And then the Tylenol becomes a part of that brain damage story. So what's happened over all these years is that you haven't been able to even talk about these things. And what we're seeing more and more is the opening up of science, the idea that it's okay to talk about anything, that you can make a claim, you can have a hypothesis, and then you can have discussion and debate. That's what real science is. But we've had 20 or 30 years of science being whatever the government tells you it is, whatever the corporate manufacturer of a product says it is. So they say our products are safe. If you disagree with them, they attack you, they engage in smear campaigns. So that's just a total, sort of corrupt system. And you had President Trump coming out on national television saying, don't go get 5 vaccines in the same day. Don't go get multiple virus vaccines. Try to find them separately. Don't get vaccines that have mercury in them because mercury is a known neurotoxin. Don't get vaccines that have aluminum in them. So suddenly we're allowed to talk about it once again. And that, I think, is just incredible progress, because this has never been about being anti-vaccine or anti-drugs or anti-pesticides or anti-chemicals in food. It's the idea that we have a right to get good, valid information so that we can think about how these products might affect us. And we know more about ourselves. We know more about our own children, and our doctors know about them. And there's a history, so we can make better decisions. We don't need more regulation. We need more information, and we need to open up the world to this much broader discussion of what's good for us, what works, and what alternatives there are, so that there are hundreds of different companies that have real access to the public and can make their argument that there's a simpler, healthier way to do all kinds of things. That there's better food, that there are better drugs, that maybe fewer drugs are better for all of us. All of these kinds of things. Are there scientific alternatives to some of the pesticides? Can you get the same outcome or even a better output of food products without using the worst, most toxic chemicals? So that's what I think is happening here, and I think that it's just an incredible breakthrough, and it shows a president and an HHS secretary who are prioritizing public health, and that can actually be great for the economy. That healthy people go out more, they spend more money, they start businesses, they invest. Bobby Kennedy says that somebody who's healthy has 1,000 dreams. Somebody who has a chronic disease has one dream, and that is to stop suffering. So I think you can get this incredible boost of energy and of innovation in the economy by stopping the corruption, that the corruption becomes a bottleneck to common sense, to innovation, to good ideas, to new products. People go all around the world now to do procedures that you can't do in the US. People go to Mexico to have stem cell treatments, or the Bahamas, or they go to Germany to have a certain kind of knee surgery. So we need to be the country that people come from all around the world on, to get treatments. That we have these great scientists, these great doctors, these great business people who are coming up with new ideas, but the system is set up to stifle those new ideas and to stifle innovation. And when that stops, I think you're going to see Americans healthier than ever, the economy doing better than ever, our military not having the same problems that it's having, finding healthy people. So I think that there are great things happening, and that, one of the roadblocks to it is this insane kind of Trump derangement syndrome, where people on the left are going to, eat a chemical in a food just to spite the president, or take Tylenol while they're pregnant to spite the president, or just do the opposite of anything. And, but I think that there are real breakthroughs being made, and that some of the things that are being seen now just can't be unseen. And that this administration is just really hitting it out of the ballpark. So I'm proud to have a small role in that, and just, so grateful to the president and to Secretary Kennedy for the work that he's doing against all odds.
Well, I wish you could stay and talk to us for the rest of the day. I know that you've got other and better things to do, but it has been a fascinating conversation. And when you do talk to Secretary Kennedy, I wish you would just tell him that, like Richard Nixon said, that might not be the best intro, that the great silent majority is a reality, and people are cheering for him, praying for him, and urging him on. And I'm certainly one of those. And I also would echo that same sentiment for you. And Tony Lyons, the president of MAHA Action and the MAHA PAC, thank you for what you're doing to help keep us and help us be more healthy. We really appreciate you and all the effort.
Thank you so much, John.
you're like me, you're still mourning the loss of Charlie Kirk. Here to help us through our grief is Lucas Miles. He's the director of Turning Point Faith and a close confidant and a colleague of the late Charlie Kirk. Lucas, welcome to The Truth. And again, our condolences and deepest sympathies. I know this has hit you very hard, as it has so many across the world, really.
Yeah, it's been a difficult time, to say the least. It doesn't even do justice, for what we've experienced. It still doesn't seem real. I keep thinking I just need to call Charlie or text him and talk to him about all this craziness. And it just feels like the world changed, 2 weeks ago, and I think it did. And so we're doing our best to heal as we keep going. In Charlie Kirk fashion, there's a lot of work to do, and we're gonna keep pushing ahead. Our team did such a great job of putting together a memorial. It was so honoring. The gospel was proclaimed. Charlie would have loved everything about it, and it was a beautiful representation and just witness to his life, and also to the gospel. But I just wish he was here to see it.
Did you help choreograph the service?
Not in any way I would want to take credit for. Our events team is they did the heavy lifting of all that. We helped get certain invitations there and special guests and those things in the faith department that my team worked on. I had spoken to a few of the speakers regarding questions that they had before they were preparing, but no meaningful way that anybody should know my name in regards to that. Our team, our C-suite, really stepped up to the plate. They ran point on that with our events team, and they're the best in the business. Charlie always told them that, and we saw that this last week. They did in 7 days what would normally take organizations 18 to 24 months to prepare for. 100,000 people in the room, 300,000 people showing up in the city.
300,000.
It's incredible.
That is amazing. That is a staggering number. Well, if I were to sum up the service, I would have three observations to make. First and foremost, in 2 words, pure class. It to me, every speaker, well, with one small exception, one notable exception, absolutely hit all the right notes. Now, I love Trump. I've supported him through 3 elections. I'd walk through a brick wall for him. I think he's the greatest president we've ever had. I don't know why I feel the need to be disparaging even a little bit, but he's the only one who went political. I kind of wish he hadn't, but I think we knew that when you all asked him to speak.
Here's what I would say about that is, and I've had multiple people bring this up to me, is that Charlie loved President Trump.
Yes, he did.
He loved him as he was. He loved him as he is. Charlie wouldn't have any expectation for President Trump to be anything but President Trump when he got up on that stage. And I think he was President Trump on that stage.
I think he was President Trump.
He was the way that he would be with Charlie if Charlie was in the room. And somebody could see that and go, oh, I wish he would have done this or that differently. But, I think for us at Turning Point, and that we're close to Charlie, Charlie loved the president so much. I think he'd be honored that he was there. And, obviously it was a humorous moment in the midst of this very centered, classy memorial. But I think that it's what made it to some degree Turning Point and Charlie, and weirdly it was fitting, even though it might have seemed out of place, with some of those comments.
Well, and in defense of the president, I think what you get with Trump is unvarnished, pure, raw truth. And I think that's what he brought on Sunday. Yeah. And as you said, I think that's what we would have expected. And so I'm not upset about it. And I don't know why I felt the need to be even a little bit negative, because I'm not trying to cast aspersions. I thought, again, pure class. Appreciate that. The third observation I would make is, and I've known Turning Point for a long time. I first met Charlie in Atlanta, Georgia, at a small reception that my friend Dudley Moore had for him, I think in 2016. It may have been 2017, but I met Charlie then, and Candace Owens. They were both there. It had to be 2017, now that I recall, because he was having to drive to D.C. because he had an appointment with President Trump in the Oval Office the next day. And there had been a big snowstorm up and down the East Coast, and all the flights were
Grounded.
canceled. And so, but Charlie came, he stayed, he engaged. And so 2017 minus 25, 8 years ago, 8 minus 31, he would have been 23 then. Is that right? And I said to my wife on the way home, have you ever met a more impressive duo of both Charlie and Candace?
Yeah.
And I don't know how old Candace was then. I don't know how she is now, but she had to be a child. And she was so insightful and so on point on the things that she talked about, and very revealing of her own life and story. I mean, I cannot tell you how many things like that I've been to in my life. That one stands out in my brain very much in the present moment. I mean, I remember it vividly, and in a good way. So, Lucas, you're also pastor of your own church in Indiana, I believe.
Yeah, near South Bend, Indiana. So, a suburb of South Bend called Influence Church. There's no I in the front, just a capital N. So it's influencechurch.com.
And are you a Midwesterner?
I am. Yeah, I'm actually from the greater South Bend area. We moved away for about 2 years. My wife and I first got married, but have been home base here, since then. And so I commute between here and Phoenix now to work at the headquarters for TPUSA. I like Phoenix in February, and I like Indiana in August. So, we try to get the best of both worlds.
As a fellow Midwesterner, having been born in Columbus, Ohio, and I went to Ohio Wesleyan, which is on the same latitude as Fort Bend, I believe. I sympathize with everything that you just said. But just one, let's stick with the service just one more moment. I guess the point I was trying to get to that I didn't finish was that I was overwhelmed by the breadth of Turning Point USA, not in terms of the numbers of people that it reached and the outpouring of support that they received, but just like you said, the C team, the executive staff, the numbers of people, and the quality of the people that we were exposed to over the weekend and on Sunday in particular really was an eye opener to me. I mean, you just, as a consumer, you just sort of see Charlie, and I've met a few people over the years, mainly in development, that come through Palm Beach that I've had the pleasure of getting to know, but I never really consciously was aware of just how many people there were working behind the scenes. And it was very impressive.
I mean, look, well over 500 employees, and, even more during election seasons with Action and everything else. Charlie built a machine, and, with multiple arms and divisions, everything from Turning Point Action to Turning Point USA to TPUSA Faith, our high school division, which we call Club America, our NFP program, which is our college field program. We have Turning Point Education. We have offices in, Phoenix and Chicago. We have, staff all across the country. Just in the faith department alone, I have about 40 staff members that are calling on churches and pastors across the country. Charlie, he just had a gift at discovering talent, finding people, seeing the best in them, empowering them, knowing who to trust, who he couldn't trust. He was really good at it. And, he used his short life to build something, I think, that will last for a really long time.
Well, I certainly hope so. And I thought Erica Kirk did a phenomenal job. How she had the courage and the presence to be able to do that is beyond me. I've attended both of my parents' funerals, and I was asked to speak at both. And I just said, I'm sorry, I just can't. I mean, I was too much of an emotional wreck. Yeah. And for her to be able to get up in front of millions of people and speak as eloquently and as she was just real, it just came off as being very real.
There's a grace on her life, without a doubt. The resolve that she has, the poise, just the words. She's said there's a reason she was married to Charlie Kirk. She's brilliant as well, and they were just a great duo. And I think that. I've heard people say, what's Turning Point USA going to do now that they don't have Charlie? And what I would say is we're not without Charlie. His DNA and his vision has been imprinted all over this organization. It's also held, dearly within Erica's heart. She is the right choice to lead, moving forward. She's going to do a great job as CEO. were excited and cheering her on in that role. And I know the whole nation's, behind her after she really captured their hearts, through this address.
I've said on this program that I think that Charlie's assassination will go down in history as one of those events that you will remember where you were when you found out that Charlie Kirk had been assassinated. I know exactly where I was. How about yourself, Lucas? Where were you?
I was actually in Aruba. Charlie had encouraged me to get some vacation time this year, and took a vacation with my wife and then another couple friend of ours. And I was sitting by the pool. My assistant at Turning Point had told me, he said, "Hey, I'm not gonna bother you unless something major happens. So I'll just send you an email or a telegram message or something if it's minor. But I'll give you a call if something comes up." And my phone rings while I'm sitting at the pool, and immediately my heart sunk. And I answered.
I'm so sorry.
He said, "Charlie's been shot. It's bad. We don't know anything else. Get home as soon as you can." And so I, got off the phone. My wife was upstairs, went up and connected with her and told her what happened. Obviously we're turning on all the news and watching our phones for further updates, started praying. And then immediately, started working on tickets home. We got the first flight out that we could, and got to Phoenix as soon as we could, just to be there with the staff.
Well, it's hard for me to imagine what went through your mind and how you and all the people that were associated with Charlie and close to him, the impact that it must have had is not describable in words. So what do you think? There are a lot of rumors circulating. I have been a student of JFK's assassination for 65 years. I was home from school with the flu the day that he was murdered in Dallas. As a 10-year-old, it had a tremendous impact on me then, and it has stuck with me throughout my life. And it has caused me to dig very deeply into his assassinations. Roger Stone, I think, has written the most compelling book, one of the most compelling books on the men who killed Kennedy, the case against LBJ. Everything in the book resonates with me. It all ties. And he went on television in a podcast yesterday and said he sees a lot of similarities between Dealey Plaza and the assassination venue that Charlie was taken down in. Do you have any thoughts or insights?
Look, I think that, I'm probably less excited in this category. Andrew Colvett, who is our director of comms and a dear friend, and was a dear friend of Charlie's. He was on Alex Clark's Cultural Apothecary, show here that just came out. And, he spoke to some of these things a little bit. I think that, us within Turning Point, we have a very high degree of confidence that Bongino and Cash are doing their jobs, that they have they've gotten the right guy, that there's going to be a fair trial, but that we pray that justice is done. I think that what we are, seeing of all these different conspiracy theories that are popping up online, for me personally, I know the people that are on the ground. I know the people that were 5 feet and 10 feet from Charlie. I've talked to them. I've spent time with them. I've hugged them. I know their hearts. I know how much they cared about the man. There's just no there, when you start looking at this. And so I think that, what took Charlie's life is what I wrote about in my book, Pagan Threat. And Charlie understood the threats in this nation better than anybody. There's been an indoctrination of our young people. It's overflowed into especially some of these, more niche demographics like the trans community, and other kind of outcast groups within our society, where they have seen themselves as oppressed and they've seen Christians as oppressors, and it's weaponized, some of them to lash out, because of the trauma they've gone through. Now, whether or not there's other people in chat rooms that were aware of the plans or egging them on, or, somehow inspiring them, I think that, there should be no stone left unturned. We should look into all of that stuff to make sure it's there. Do I think this is some, international, governmental conspiracy? No, I don't. That would be my, estimation as somebody who, I wasn't there, but in terms of what I'm seeing, I mean, there was a lot of leftists that hated Charlie. That was no surprise. And one of them, finally acted this out, and it's a terrible thing. And it's an act that all of us are going to be wrestling with for the rest of our lives.
Well, I think there's a lot of wisdom and truth in what you just said. I'm in your court right now, but I'm open to receiving other information. I think there are some anomalies that need to be explained. One, there was an old guy. For me to call somebody else old, that's some irony in that. But an older guy who, right shortly after the shots were fired, stood up and said, "Shoot me, shoot me, shoot me." That's bizarre, and I think I would like an explanation for that. I think Candace Owens has done a remarkable job of debunking the concerns about the camera being taken down and the card removed. It was to preserve the evidence, not to hide it. And I watched her video, and she was very convincing to me. I guess the thing that I am open to receiving information on is who co-opted this guy. I know that you are strong in your belief, and you're probably better in the way you live your life than I am. But I too believe in God and try to live a Christian life. There is and I've said on this show, there is a piece of me, and don't misunderstand this, please, but that feels heartbreak for Tyler Robinson. This was a young guy who had so much promise. He was smart. He had a 4.0 average. He had two parents that loved him. Two brothers and a sister, I believe, a family that appeared to be of God-fearing, hardworking, all-American family. And he took Charlie's life, and I accept that explanation, frankly, but he also took his own life in the process. What a horrible plan or mindset. And so I do feel a sadness for him having destroyed his own life. And I would just wonder if these people think about the destruction that they bring along with that. He's also destroyed his parents' life and his siblings' life. They'll never be able to go out in public again without shame and ridicule. And so I just want to know from a theological standpoint, am I crazy to have these feelings of any, even a little compassion for the shooter?
Look, I mean, I think Erica, spoke on behalf of herself and the family the other night at the memorial in her statements of forgiveness. I think that is was just a testimony of Christ, really pouring through her. That doesn't mean that that actions are without consequences. Personal forgiveness is different than judicial justice and response.
Let me make it clear. He deserves the full weight of the law, including capital punishment. If we're not going to have capital punishment, and we're not going to apply it in this case after a fair and complete trial and a jury of his peers, I don't know when we ever would. He is the most deserving person that I've ever known.
What I would encourage, John, is I think that the way we have to look at this is that, this kid, for what it appears, was a product of the very thing that Charlie warned about. And that is the indoctrination of the education system, the indoctrination of Marxist ideology and all these cycles, the weaponization of these fringe groups, and so, look, whether there was anybody directly involved or not in the planning of this, that'll come out over time, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, that's what I want. If there was, I want full disclosure. It's the only way to stop it.
Yeah, but the directly involved, that stops those individuals. But the only way to really stop this is to stop the indirectly involved aspects, and that is to get wokeism out of our schools.
Yes,
to get wokeism out of our universities, to get Marxist indoctrination, out of society. It doesn't have a place here. I'm all as a turning point, director. Look, I support freedom of speech. I think that, but doesn't mean every good idea should be given prominence. And we've been giving government funding to really bad ideas like Marxism for way too long, and that has to be stopped. And so I think that it makes Charlie's message even more prominent here, that the importance of the battlefield of these universities, and recognizing that they have crumbled, that as Charlie would say, that college is a scam. Now, look, obviously, if you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be certain professions, you need that. But that the system that is behind this, that's driving this engine of woke professors that are, preying upon kids with this ideology, we've seen the fruit of that. It's been exposed for what it is. It's been found to be what it is, and that is it's full of folly. And I pray that this wakes a lot of people up, and I think that it is to what's there. And because I don't ever want to see this happen again, especially to somebody that I care about.
My sense is, when I was a kid, a long, long time ago, we started every day in school with the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag and a scripture reading. And one of my favorite parts of being in grammar school, there weren't many of them, was when I got to read the scripture to the class. And I remember that vividly. I felt like it kind of enthused my soul and got into my DNA. We've lost that. And a lot of these kids don't have a role model. Many of them have no father. How are they going to get values and a moral compass unless we figure out how to bring it back through the educational system or some other viable vehicle?
Well, I think it's got to come through the church first and foremost. I mean, that's the work that I'm doing at TPUSA Faith. It's why I wrote my book, Pagan Threat, that Charlie did the foreword for. It's got to come through families. It's got to come through. If we're trying, this idea that, it takes a city to raise a child, that's gotten us into this mess. It takes two parents to raise a child.
Yeah, absolutely. A mom and a dad.
A church, to help in that process and speak into it. And we've lost that. And so we need pastors to come back to a biblical worldview. We need parents to take on personal responsibility. I think that there's other factors that are happening there as well that we need to, be sensitive to. But, this all kind of plays into it. So, look, I'm honored to have spent the last year and a half working for Charlie. He was a dear friend. I've known him for since 2020. And I'm so thankful that he saw something in me and brought me along for the journey. I'll miss him for the rest of my life. But I'm grateful that he's more alive than ever. He's with the Lord. And ultimately, this earth isn't our home, at least in its present capacity. And so there will come a day where all truth will be, laid out, where everything, that's not known and that's hidden will become known. I look forward to that day. But most of all, right now, I look forward to seeing my friend.
Well, this is the fastest 22 minutes I've spent in a long time. And I know we've only got 2 more minutes left. I want you to tell us about Pagan Threat, the book that you own or wrote, and tell us what it's about, where to get it, and how's the book doing?
So the book is doing fabulous. It's really exploded. I mean, I have Charlie to thank for that in many ways. I've written bestsellers before, but this one has had just so much interest because of Charlie's involvement with it. I'm sure as writing the foreword, Charlie, when you go back and read what he wrote, and he wrote this, not long before he died. It's eerie a little bit. It seems like a prognostication, a declaration on the culture that we're in and what's necessary to stand during these perilous times. And so I encourage everybody to get a copy of this. I have a roadmap on how do we work our way out of it, a 7-step plan for the church, for Christians, for conservatives, for parents, grandparents to be able to go through. But there is an attempt to push aside a Christian worldview in order to bring in a Marxist indoctrination of this country. We saw it play out 2 weeks ago. I think we've continued to see it time and time again. A lot of the news stories that are popping up. And so I encourage people to go out and get a copy of Pagan Threat. You can get it at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, wherever books are sold. But be aware, on Amazon, there are multiple fraudulent versions that have popped up. They've tried to spoof the cover and put a bunch of AI text in it. So make sure and find the one that has the true foreword from Charlie Kirk. It's a hardback from Organics Books.
Well, I tell you, that is shocking in and of itself. I will definitely get the book and read it. I'll look forward to it. Thank you so much for coming on The Truth today with us, Lucas. I wish we had more time. Maybe you'll come back and we can delve into some of this stuff more. In parting, do you think that to your point and the things you alluded to, it feels to me like our country is being pulled apart. Do you think this Marxist, communist kind of talk track, it doesn't feel organic to me in any sense. It feels like it is being pushed on us in this country and by people. That's why I wonder if Tyler Robinson wasn't co-opted by some group or force that he fell for. I don't know. But it seems like everywhere we look that we're being pressured and forced by something that is not normal or natural.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I'm out of time, so I'm not able to kind of give a full answer to that. But I would say, look, we've seen this is all intentional, and I'm not saying the situation with Charlie directly is intentional, other than what we know about it right now. But the breakdown in our society is intentional, and there has been an intentionality to indoctrinating students and children and stealing our seminaries and our churches, with this. So depravity doesn't surprise me. People are fallen, but there's a solution, and it's the cross, and we need to keep pushing into that. So
you've got to go, and I'm not interrupting you. I just want to let you off the hook. How old are you, Lucas?
I am 45.
My gosh, you look like you're 35. The number of young people that we were exposed to this weekend and their accomplishment make me feel small. I have got to get my butt in gear and leave something more meaningful in this life.
You're harder than ever, and that's what Charlie wants.
And I just appreciate you and your colleagues so much. Keep up the good work, and hope our paths will cross soon.
Thank you.
If you listen to John Tamney, the left, the right, supply-siders, they've all got it wrong. And Anthony, you thought I was bad. This guy has alienated the rest of the whole country. There's nobody left. John Tamney, welcome to The Truth. And tell us what you mean. Why has everybody got it wrong? We're talking about the economy, obviously, and government deficit spending.
Well, they've got it wrong because I'm right. But more importantly than that, they've got it wrong.
You sound like my wife.
Yeah, that's right. Let's just accept it and move on.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks for coming on today. We sure enjoyed the interview.
No, we'll talk about sushi now. No, but everyone's wrong because left, right, supply side, libertarian, all the different viewpoints, they all believe that the only way to shrink the federal debt is to give Congress more money to shrink it. I've never heard of something more ludicrous in my life that the path to reduce debt is to give them more money. But that's what the warring ideologies all say specifically. If they're not saying it specifically, they're implying it. And so I've written a book that says, no, we have lots of debt precisely because too much money flows into Washington now. And much more perilously, exponentially more tax money will flow into Washington in the future.
Well, I kind of get your point. I have a nit where some of your ideology or your theories come from. I mean, to me, you left out the Tea Party, Ron Johnson and Rand Paul and others. I don't know if they're Tea Partiers. I know Ron Johnson is. I don't know about Rand Paul, but they certainly sing off the same page of music, and that is, they're not complaining about a lack of revenue. They're complaining about too much spending. I mean, I thought that was the drumbeat that most conservatives were following.
Well, I think government spending is terrible. I think it's the biggest tax of all because it's the central planning of precious resources. So believe me that I'm siding with them. But what does Ron Johnson keep saying? He says the goal should be a balanced budget.
Well, what's the matter with that?
To balance a budget in the United States, a country that has taxable access to the most productive, enterprising people on earth, that's like slam dunking on a 6-foot basket when you're 7 feet tall. I don't want a balanced budget because ask yourself the question, what are we going to look like if for years and years we have a balanced budget of $8 trillion? Would you prefer that or an annual deficit of $1 trillion on $1.5 trillion in spending? The problem is the spending. The problem is the extraction. To focus on a balanced budget is to allow government to grow and grow and grow. And that's the real burden in the future. It's the size of government left to the grandkids. It's not the debt. It's what we're leaving to them in terms of progress not made because government's spending too much and this massive government that they've got to support. I want to talk about overtaxation that enables the debt.
Well, I will concede that I think that Donald Trump probably, if he's done anything that's disappointed me, it is that he has not, by an error of omission, not tackled the deficit, not tackled government spending. He of anyone on the planet, he is probably the best person that could get the federal budget under control. And I do think that he is trying to solve the problem largely through new revenue, i.e., tariffs. And I have the hope that his methodology is to, one, get the tax cuts in place, which Art Lafleur would tell you actually will produce more revenue and therefore more government tax revenue. And I'm okay with it coming from that source. But I think chapter 2 will be a serious attempt to reduce government spending.
Two things on that. Government revenue increasing, we've had that for 45 years. Think about it. In 1980, total federal debt was $900 billion. The view of supply siders, and to be clear, if you read my book, I am a supply sider. I think supply side is a tautology, reduce barriers to production. But the view was, oh yeah, we'll just grow our way out of the debt. In fact, what happened was very predictable. Soaring government revenue born of economic growth enabled quite a bit more debt. The total federal deficit is 42 times what it was. That's not a surprise. That would have happened with Republicans or Democrats, and it would have, because if your revenues are trusted now, and more importantly, if they're trusted in the future, the world's lined up to lend you. And that's why I don't think spending cuts will work either. To be clear, I think government spending is the biggest tax. I don't want that to be questioned. But let's say Elon Musk had succeeded, $2 trillion in savings. Did he promise to burn up the $2 trillion? Because see, otherwise, if you save $2 trillion, you're going to give Congress $2 trillion worth of fresh powder to start on new programs.
No, you make a point that I have stated here repeatedly, and that is, with this newfound $600 billion of newfound tariff money is wonderful, provided that it goes to debt reduction, period. Hard stop, no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
But let's say we do that. Will that reduce government? Usually a borrower just has more credit. In any other scenario, whether an individual, a business, you pay down the debt, that just expands your ability to run up more of it. And that's why we see every time that any attempt to pay off the debt does nothing to shrink government, because it just gives them more runway. And we see it under Democrats and Republicans. Remember, during the lockdowns in 2020, Donald Trump signed into law $3 trillion worth of spending that subsidized lockdowns across the country.
Well, look, in all fairness, we were dealing with a worldwide pandemic. I mean, the alternative was to allow the American economy to crash. And I don't mean crash, I mean crash and burn. I mean, I don't think that he had any choice but to provide stimulus and help keep the economy alive. And it worked, by the way.
Well, but I don't think it did. If I take $100 from your pocket and go spend it, is the economy going to grow? No, because you'll be $100 poorer. The answer was to not take away people's freedom in the first place. I don't need government to force me.
Well, that's a totally different subject. And I understand your point, but he didn't just take the money from the American people. He gave it back. I mean, I got stimulus money in the mail, and my two businesses got PPP money in the mail. I mean, that was very significant and material to my being able to keep 50 or 60 people employed and keep the doors open. Well, the doors weren't open, but the fixed costs kept coming in.
But I agree. Look, I think you'd have preferred to have your doors open, to have your freedom, rather than government giving you money that they took from you.
I think you're confusing masking, social distancing, and shutting down the American way of life, suspending it for, I don't even remember how long it was. Was it a month, 6 weeks? I guess it depended on what state you were in. Florida got opened back up relatively early. My wife and I really did not alter our quality of life appreciably. We just continued to do what we did, but instead of going into a restaurant, we took takeout. So, I mean, but it seems to me you're confusing freedom with economics, and in the case of the pandemic. And
how am
there
I?
are certainly,
I just don't want my freedom taken, and they took freedom and they crushed the economy.
Well, totally. But I mean, who's to blame there?
President Trump. Who else could have done this?
I challenge that because I think he was relying on the best evidence that he had from Anthony Fauci and Dr. Birx, and they just flat out lied to him. People that you have a good faith reason to believe out and out lied. And I don't make that up. We know that from Anthony Fauci's own emails. He was emailing people and he was saying that there's no scientific basis for social distancing. There is no proof that masks are going to stop the spread of COVID. Yet he was the leading proponent of all the above. And again, Rand Paul was the first person in the Congress to really challenge him on it.
Well, okay, but I don't need a Republican to be for limited government when times are good. I need a Republican to be for limited government when all around them are losing their heads. I needed Trump to act like Trump in 2020, not to take the advice of someone else. Because as a free person, I think it's most important. Freedom is easily most important when all around us are, when no one knows the answer to something. Because how else can you find the answer? And so I don't think it's enough to say that Trump got bad advice. Trump should have said, I will not fight a virus by putting people out of work and causing global starvation. Not happening here. And better yet, I'm not going to sign the $3 trillion spending bill into law that will subsidize this for weeks and months at a time. If he hadn't done that, California would have had to end its shutdowns within a week, and Florida would never have locked down in the first place. To say that Trump wasn't at fault here, I think that's giving him a lot of credit. We expect Republicans to act like Republicans.
No disrespect intended. I think you're being very uncharitable to President Trump. I mean, have you ever confronted a worldwide pandemic? I mean, who is he supposed to listen to? He's not a medical doctor. I mean, is he supposed to just through fiefdom say, to hell with all of you guys? You're telling me that and every country in the world shut its borders and closed its doors for the period until we got the pandemic under control. But you seem to possess some kind of superior knowledge that you knew better than to do that, when every medical expert on the planet was suggesting that you had to stop the spread of the pandemic.
But John, that's precisely because I don't know that I wouldn't take away freedom. Freedom is what produces the knowledge, because some people were going to lockdown. I know libertarians who didn't enter a restaurant for over a year. I also know people like me. My parents are 80 living out in California. They refused to let the lockdowns interfere with their lives. They said, we're healthy people. We are going to live. It's choice that teaches us whether or not something is as lethal as they say in the first place. See, even if Fauci was lying, and let's agree that he was, you don't say, we're not going to let one person destroy the global economy and the U.S. economy. You say, we're going to allow freedom so that we can find out if what Fauci is saying is true. I'm sorry. It's easy to be a Republican during time. It's like George Bush in 2008. Well, he was for limited government until he wasn't. I'm tired of Republicans stealing my freedom and bailing out and locking us down when they should allow us to be free. I'm sorry. I'm a real Republican, but they keep failing me in times of need.
Well, how many people would you have had die before you tried to take drastic measures to stop the spread of COVID?
Do you need government to force you to live? Do you need government to keep you from doing things that might cause you to die? I don't need that. If people had started dying en masse, ask yourself the question, if people had started dying en masse, do you think Americans would have needed lockdowns in addition to stop it? They would have locked themselves down on their own. You don't need government to hold your hand to do the right or wrong thing. You don't trust big government, neither do I. Why would you trust them in this instance?
Well, I think that's an oversimplification. The fact of the matter is that there's a lot about government I don't like, and there's a lot about big government that I really dislike. But the fact of the matter is we live in one of the safest, healthiest countries on earth. When you consider the food chain, you consider law and order, you consider travel. Government does provide a very needed service. When I go to a restaurant and I eat, I have the confidence of knowing that that food is probably safe. Not 100% of the time, but most of the time. So I'm not an expert. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a physician. I'm not a disease specialist. And so if I were president of the United States, I would not be making those decisions. I would be relying on the biggest, the best, and the brightest that I had at my disposal. And I think that's exactly what Trump did. You're a good Monday morning quarterback, but I don't think you would have made those decisions if you were in the chair.
No. Trust me, this was not Monday morning quarterback. I was against it from the beginning. I don't believe in this is no Monday morning quarterback. And you look back at what I was writing from February on. You don't take away freedom. It's that simple. And we can't be situational about what we trust government to do. I think restaurants would be pretty safe without government going in there and harassing them and saying, you better follow our rules.
Well, I can take you to a nice Mexican restaurant down here in West Palm Beach that flunked their health care score, and you may want to rethink that perspective. But anyway, I can continue this if you want to. I don't mind. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the economy and your insights into how to get control of government spending. I'm not sure that I have heard the answer, other than I think that most conservatives agree that we need to curtail spending and use that savings to pay down the debt.
Yeah, that's what, and I would love to see reductions in government spending, but it never leads to reduced debt. And the reason it doesn't is if you give Congress fresh powder, they discover new ways to spend it. Let's never
So
forget.
how are we going to, what's the answer then?
Well, I think the answer, what limits spending and what limits borrowing? The inflow of dollars. It's that basic. An individual that's known to not take in a lot of money now and not expected to take in a lot in the future can't borrow. A business that's thought to have very limited prospects in the present and future can't borrow. It works every single time. And that's what I explain in the book. I don't use charts and graphs and percentages. I just say, look at businesses. NVIDIA, the most valuable company in the world today, for the longest time couldn't rub two nickels together. And why couldn't it? No one trusted its future. Now NVIDIA can borrow billions and billions and tens of billions at a time. Government is no different, precisely because it has taxable access to the most productive people on earth, and even more perilously because it will maintain taxable access to the most productive people on earth whose wealth will grow and grow and grow in the present and future. Debt by definition is going to go up because the world is lined up to lend to a country that has so many rich people who are so massively overtaxed. And so I'm trying to change the discussion. For the longest time, we've said we can do this with spending cuts, a combination of spending cuts and more tax revenue. And all we've seen during that time, quite predictably, is debt soaring and the size of government soaring. At some point, we've got to say, what we've been doing has not just been wrong, but it's been abjectly wrong, just incredibly stupid. Let's focus on reducing the flow of dollars to government so that the people around the world are less willing to lend to us.
Well, we actually do have the guardrail that you're proposing, and it's called the debt limit. But the debt limit, they just keep raising it. So I don't know what guardrail you would put in place to get the politicians to behave. But, we blame the politicians. But, the fact of the matter is the special interests are really to blame. They're the ones who continue to drive the spending and the flow of money out of Washington. And ultimately, I don't know that it's not the American citizens that gimme. We've got 50% of our population that are in favor of a socialist communist form of government. We have grown an entire generation of people that are entitled. And instead of being grateful for what this country has done for them, we've just created a system where they want more. And the more they demand, the more we give. And the more we give, the more they want.
Well, but at some point, we've got to ask the people who promise when they go to Washington, promising to lead and to shrink government. At some point, we've got to hold them to their promises. And I'm merely saying spending cuts don't work. The Laffer curve is true. It's empirically obvious and true, but it only grows government because what's expected to take in more in the future can borrow easily. I'm saying politicians have to start talking about it differently. What they've been doing has been wrong. Maybe they should look at something that Republicans have never had the courage to do. Not just reduce taxes on the rich, but reduce them so substantially that revenues go down now and will be expected to continue to go down in the future. Do what would be good for freedom, brilliant for the economy, but that would also limit the willingness of the world to lend to us. Republicans have never tried it, but maybe they should. The New York Times will keep reporting every Republican tax cut is a massive giveaway to the rich, but they never are. The Trump tax cuts in 2017 in many ways raised taxes on the rich. At some point, let's cut them.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir. I think Elon Musk would like your theory. I mean, he said he's going to use the power of the pocketbook to go primary people that promise to go to Washington and reduce spending, and then continue to vote for continuing resolutions and increase spending. I'm right there. No issue with me whatsoever. And I think that is the ultimate solution. The American people need to take a stand and throw the bums out that continue the reckless spending.
Mm-hmm. But there's got to be at some point, I do believe there's got to be a change in the conversation there, and that no one's talking, not Ron Johnson, not Elon Musk, not Rand Paul. And I'm very friendly with Rand Paul. It's all about, we've got a debt problem. We need more revenue to pay it off. No. We have debt because we have too much revenue.
No, I've heard Rand Paul say on numerous occasions that all it takes is one penny of reduced spending for 10 years and the debt goes away. 1% for 10 years. Over 10 years, you get 10% reduction in government spending, and you get rid of the deficit.
Again, does that work in any other walk of life? It doesn't reduce it if you don't start reducing the flow of dollars to government. You're just setting the stage for more borrowing. It's not a spending problem. It's a too much revenue problem. How much debt do you think Russia has? $300 billion. Do you think Russia has so little debt because Vladimir Putin is secretly a classical thinker who recognizes, as you and I do, that government spending is a tax on prosperity? Russia has no debt because the world doesn't trust its future. And so, and that's why Haiti doesn't have debt. That's why Peru doesn't have lots of debt. We have too much revenue now and in the future. And until spending cuts will not fix what is a problem of too much revenue.
All right. You heard it here first, folks. John Tamney and the deficit delusion. Any other parting thoughts before we run out of time here this morning?
Well, thank you so much for giving me a forum to look. Everyone says it's counterintuitive. I'm editor of Real Clear Markets, so I see the viewpoints on debt. I wrote a book that rejects all of them: left, right, supply side, libertarian. No one agrees with me. So thank you for giving me a forum. And I think ultimately we do agree. Government spending is central planning of precious resources. I want to shrink that, but I also want to shrink the government's ability to borrow to central plan even more resources. And I think the only way to do it is to shrink the flow of dollars to Washington. Spending cuts will not fix what is a revenue problem of too much revenue. So fingers crossed.
All right. Thank you very much. I hope you can continue to spread that word, and we want the same outcome for sure. John Tamney, and where do we find the book, and how do people follow you if they would like to stay in touch?
Buy in bulk on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. It will hopefully find its way to bookstores, and you can find me on Twitter, and I'm editor of Real Clear Markets, so you can see at least one column by me every day. But seriously, thank you so much for giving me the time of day to do this. It's hard to get this message out, but I'm really doing my best to do just that.
We'll keep up the fight, and thank you for a very lively conversation and a respectful one at that, I might add. And I've enjoyed the discourse. So have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks so much. Safe travels out west.
Thank you.